Greetings everyone and welcome. It is May the 4th, and as you can tell by the title of the video and the thumbnail, I'm going to be sharing with you the statements that Vladimir Putin is making right now in Moscow on the program about his life and the future. And yes, he talks about prayer, he talks about the West, he talks about the war, he talks about Ukraine, and you are going to see it all. And the final statement he makes, you need to hang around. I've got 8 clips I'm going to play for you. The 8th one is unbelievable what comes out of his mouth. Now, I will share this with you. This is not a game for Vladimir Putin. And for sure, this is not a game for Ukraine. But by listening to these statements, it will help us understand much more clearly how important this is. And unfortunately, right now, it seems, and I can tell you, in Russia and in Ukraine and in other nations and in the United States and in those of the Catholic faith and even Christian faith, this is like so disgusting for me. But I'm here to tell you, this may be a game for Donald Trump in the White House, but this is not a game for Ukraine. And this is not a game for Vladimir Putin. And you will see why over the next few minutes with these video clips. And here we have the New York Catholic Conference responding. There's nothing clever or funny about this. I mean, the White House released it. And I know this is old news 24 hours ago, but this sets the stage for where I want to go so you understand the difference between what Trump says and how Putin is talking. They say, we just buried our beloved Pope Francis and the cardinals are about to enter a solemn conclave to elect a new successor of St. Peter. Do not mock us. Hello? Everything's a mockery, unfortunately, to Donald Trump. But it's not a game for Ukraine. It's not a game for Vladimir Putin. It's not a game for Europe. Putin makes it very clear. 8 video clips I'm going to share with you. I'm looking forward to your comments on these. Which one do you think is the craziest? Thank you for sharing, commenting, liking, subscribing, and helping us grow to share truth. Video clip number 1, he makes this statement. The West wants to finish us off. And I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, this is video happening right now in Russia.
Civilized world decided Russia was weak. So historic Russia, the USSR, fell apart. Now they want to finish off what's left. The biggest part is the Russian Federation. They want to split it into 4 or 5 pieces. I was responsible for the country's future. Of course, I started working to prevent this from ever happening. Hence the call for Western partners to respect Russia's interests. Russia will be independent and sovereign, or it won't exist at all. I wanted our partners to hear this and adjust their attitude towards Russia. But unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears. They heard it, but didn't respond appropriately. This ultimately led to today's tragic events in Ukraine.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. So right off the bat, that was a 2007 statement he made where you must understand the Russian position. You're not going to break us all apart. And now we see this almost 20 years later, 18 to be exact. He says, this is the root of what we're doing in Ukraine. He stated it tonight. Now, the second video clip. Can Vladimir Putin be deceived?
We must learn from this experience in the future. Many might say it's hard to believe Putin can be fooled. Well, anyone can be deceived. But we wanted to believe, given Russia's situation. We had to believe and couldn't act rashly without proper preparation. We didn't specifically prepare for this. We sincerely tried to resolve the Donbass issue peacefully. But the other side had different thoughts and actions.
The other side, not just Ukraine, and you'll hear more about that in a minute, but actually the United States, the European Union, and the West. So can Putin be fooled? Well, maybe, but no, we had to prepare for this. Now he makes the great statement referencing back to World War II and letting the world and the soldiers know that, remember, at the end of the day, Moscow is behind you.
When you ordered the start of this special military operation, did you foresee it leading to such significant changes in our society, like the awakening of some deep-seated forces of the people? I not only thought about it, but I actually hoped for this outcome. Of course, there was the possibility of a different event trajectory and a different societal state. And in that regard, the risk was indeed significant. Overall, I placed my hopes on, I truly hoped for, a societal reaction exactly like this. And when an ordinary citizen starts to realize that he himself is the state, that both today and tomorrow depend on him, his children, his family, his homeland, he understands he embodies the deep state, and he represents the last frontier, the ultimate authority. Is this similar to the war? Do you remember the Great Patriotic War? Great Russia. There is nowhere to retreat. Moscow is behind us.
Great Russia, there's nowhere to retreat. Moscow is behind us. This video is being played right now in Russia, and everybody is seeing it, and you are being able to see it translated into English for wherever you are at. He says, we're not going to make these mistakes again. Not going to happen. And Russia's great, and Moscow is behind you. He next states, you know, when we trusted the West, that is where we made our biggest mistake.
You once said that you work and live by the principle of never regretting anything. We need to draw conclusions and look only ahead. The last few years have been very difficult, dramatic years. What lessons should we learn from them to move forward? This is always the case. And now perhaps it sounds especially acute. Namely, decisions need to be made in a timely manner and any serious step carefully prepared for. You said you wouldn't want Russia returning to its pre-2022 path, as that path involved overt, veiled intervention. Did we not understand this before 2022, or were we unable to do anything about it? First, we didn't fully comprehend some things. Second, we still trusted, cautiously, but still trusted, our agreements with Western partners. In signing the Minsk agreements, we hoped they would be observed. But it turned out we were simply deceived. They just paused under the Minsk pretext to rearm Ukraine for war with Russia.
There you have it. So if you're wondering tonight or tomorrow, wherever you're at, what time zone, you just heard it. The Minsk agreements, the Putin view is we were deceived by the Minsk agreements. Interesting. Ukraine says we were deceived by the Minsk agreements. He says this was just the disguised veil for the West to arm Ukraine to fight against us. So if you think that we can just wave a magic wand, Donald Trump, and say a few words and then Ukraine and Russia are coming to peace, not going to happen. And that is why we're seeing some of the change in rhetoric. This literally is a fight between going back to the Soviet Union for Russia and for Ukraine to break out and go into freedom and a future. Do not miss it. Now, he also stated, we had to prepare for where we are at today. We were not prepared 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but we were preparing for this day. So this is much of what I share with you guys that, we'll sanction this, sanction that, sanction this. Ladies and gentlemen, Russia's been preparing for this for decades and decades. And I remind you that their partnerships are with the East now. And Xi Jinping confirming he will be there for 4 days in Moscow, not afraid of the Ukrainian threats, and to further develop the relationship between China and Russia. Putin saying we had to prepare.
Russia was in such a state. We couldn't act rashly without proper preparation in security, military, economics, and finance. We sincerely tried to resolve the Donbass issue peacefully, but the other side had different thoughts and actions. So we didn't start the operation earlier for those reasons. Yes, of course. You said that looking back from 2022, we should have started earlier. When exactly? In 2014. In 2014, it was almost unrealistic. The country wasn't ready for such a confrontation with the West. Look at what's happening now. Even the West and US acknowledge it. They openly say, we're in an isolation war with Russia. Essentially, Russia alone opposes the entire collective West. This required serious consideration of possible developments.
They openly say it, the US and the West, that we're in an open fight with Russia. It's only Russia standing against the collective West. That is why we had to prepare. Now, in that preparation and fighting against the West and the war in Ukraine, we must never lose our values.
If we don't stick to our values, we won't exist. Russia will simply lose its identity. This is extremely dangerous for our country's future. You've brought up a crucial point about morality in politics. When did we realize our partners weren't really partners? From the early 2000s, our opponent was clearly deceitful.
Hello, it's 2025. Vladimir Putin saying, oh, from the early 2000s, we knew that the West was deceitful in everything that they were doing. Once again, preparing for where we are at today. Now, interesting, he begins to talk now, and this is what the thumbnail was about, prayer. The Moscow theater Nordost pushed me to prayer. Now, if you do not remember, and this is what's so interesting, this is from 2002, 23 years ago, the big hijacking of the movie theater and the hostage situation, and many were killed in Russia. It was mega news. That is still in the pulse of what Russia is dealing with today. And Vladimir Putin turned to a man of prayer.
You mentioned to a colleague that you visited this chapel and prayed during the Nordost incident. That's right. What other events, national or global, have prompted you to pray? Well, I've tried to answer similar questions before. You see, Russians have a different mindset compared to Western society. We tend to think more about eternal, boundless, and higher concepts. Even atheists believe in this, I think. That's how I see it anyway. So someone with these views and moral codes sometimes feels the need to turn to a higher power. I personally experience this inner need at times. But listing all the reasons probably isn't necessary. During the Nordost crisis, I knelt in prayer for the first time ever.
During the crisis of '02, I knelt in prayer for the first time ever. And there are times when I must seek a higher power. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to believe the last one. If you made it this far to the 8th one, thank you. I look forward to your comments. Which one is most interesting to you, shocking, crazy, whatever. But I'll tell you what, number 8, he just wants to be immortal.
Been what, 25 years now? I've worked as both president and prime minister. I'm not sure if I should even say this. On the other hand, it's important. I don't feel like a typical politician who sits and decides the fate of the country or does something grand. I think it comes from my family and the environment I grew up in. I continue to breathe the same air as millions of Russian citizens. This is very important. God willing, may this continue as long as possible or never change.
I breathe the same air as Russians, and God willing, may this never change. May I be here forever, God willing. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what is on Russian TV tonight, being blown through every home as Russians will glorify Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin as breathing the same air and staying here forever. So if you were wondering if the Ukraine war is just some little regional thing, nope. This is what we've been sharing every day and will continue to do so. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping us by sharing. Share this video on your social platforms. Leave a comment, a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're growing quickly because we're sharing truth. And thank you for helping us do that. Be blessed, and we'll be back at you later.